Hello, and welcome back to Leading Today with Dr. Lisa Bagby, where we explore the intersection of emotional intelligence and leadership and what it actually takes to lead people well. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been with me for a while, you already know. I don't bring you soft leadership language that sounds good and lands nowhere. I bring conversation to help you think differently, lead differently, and connect differently with the people around you. Sometimes this may feel a little uncomfortable, but that's growth, and we welcome growth here. I'm Dr. Lisa Bagby, and today's episode is called The Authenticity Paradox. And you might ask, what is that? Well, I'll break that down today and explain when it harms and when it helps. Let's get into it. Authenticity is not the same thing as saying whatever you feel in the moment. Authenticity is not emotional leakage. It's not unfiltered frustration, and it's not using honesty as a cover for a lack of regulation. And it's also not, quote, I'm being real, unquote, when what you're actually doing is offloading your stress onto your team. No, that's not authenticity. That is actually inauthentic leadership. And what I want to be careful with around that phrase is because I know people use it differently. But when I say inauthentic, I mean that gap between what a leader says and who they are being in the moment. I mean, when the message sounds honest, but the behavior is driven by fear or ego or defensiveness, or maybe even avoidance or unmanaged emotion, that matters because people don't just hear your words, they feel your emotional tone. Leaders, you all shape your teams and that emotion, and that can actually influence psychological safety, trust, and performance. And this is a fact. This has actually been studied. So let's get into the difference. Authenticity in leadership means your words, your values, your behavior, and your intent are aligned. It means you're not pretending to have all the answers when you don't. It means you don't hide behind polished language to avoid telling the truth. In fact, it means you're honest without being chaotic and that you're steady without being cold. But it also means that people can sense consistency in how you show up. Hmm. Consistency in how you show up, how you represent yourself, how you lead your team. And it also means that inauthenticity, on the other hand, is showing up when the leader, like yourself, maybe says one thing but means another. You perform concern without real care. And worst of all, is you ask for feedback without actually being open to it. Or maybe you use vulnerability to get sympathy instead of creating trust. Let's sit on that point for a minute. Using vulnerability to get sympathy instead of creating trust. That's a deep one. A psychologically safe environment depends on openness, not a performance of openness. So, the first insight I want you to sit with is this: authentic leadership is not about always saying everything you feel, it's about telling the truth in a way that helps people feel safe, people feel informed, and that people feel oriented. That's a big difference. So, let me make this a little bit more practical for you because as a leader, you may feel frustrated, uncertain, or even hurt by a decision, a person, or a change. These feelings are human, they're real. I understand that. I've been there. But authenticity actually asks a deeper question: what do I do with these feelings before I bring them into the room? Because if you walk into a team meeting and dump your frustration on people, they don't experience your honesty as authenticity. No. In fact, they experience your unresolved emotion as instability. And that is the part many leaders miss. Your team does not need you to pretend. Your team doesn't need you to process in public. That is definitely not a good leadership demonstration. What they need is for you to be real in a way that is grounded, useful, and emotionally responsible. So that brings me to the second insight. Leadership maturity is the ability to tell the difference between self expression and leadership communication. Let's pause on that for a minute. Leadership maturity is the ability to tell the difference between self expression and leadership communication. That might take a minute to fully process. So here we go. Self expression asks, how do I feel? Leadership communication asks, what does this team need from me right now? Both matter, but they're not the same. A mature leader, emotionally intelligent leader, they know when to speak, when to pause, and when to process privately. And they also know when to translate uncertainty into clarity for the team. Now, research on authentic leadership points to self awareness, balanced processing, relational transparency, and ethical action as core elements, not just emotional openness. So that means that a leader can be transparent without oversharing. A leader can be vulnerable without becoming emotionally uncontained. And they can name pressure without making the team carry it. And that's really very important. You're not trying to shift your emotional pressure onto your team. So let me give you an example. Let's say the organization is going through change, which I know we can all relate to this. I've certainly been through many, many, many organizational changes. But an inauthentic leader response might come out or sound something like, oh, I really don't know what is happening either. This is frustrating. And honestly, I'm tired of all of it. And while that might be true emotionally, it doesn't lead the team. It's really kind of flat and doesn't really help anyone. But a more authentic leader's response might sound a little more like this. Well, there's still uncertainty in this process, and I know that can be hard. But what I can tell you is what we know today, what we are still waiting on, and what I am doing to keep us informed and supported. Now, that response is honest, it's grounded, it's clear. And that's the difference between authenticity and inauthenticity. One is emotional discharge, the other is emotional responsibility. Those things are part of being an emotionally intelligent leader. Now, I'm going to take us a little deeper because this is where the psychological part really matters. And it might get a little uncomfortable in places. But hear me, people are always examining leaders for safety cues. They're asking questions whether they say them out loud or not. They're asking, is this person steady? Is this person trustworthy? Does this leader mean what they say? Will they hold up under pressure? Or am I going to be blamed, surprised, or left confused? That means your leadership creates a climate before you even finish your sentence. If your tone is anxious, defensive, sarcastic, performative, or scattered, people feel that. People sense that. If your tone is calm, direct, transparent, and emotionally grounded, well, people feel that too. Research on emotional contagion, for instance, shows that leaders' expressivity can spread to teams and shape psychological safety and output. That is why this topic matters so much. So here's the third insight: a leader's authenticity isn't proven by how much they reveal, it's proven by how safe, clear, and trustworthy people feel around them. That is the test. Not did the leader say something personal or did the leader sound casual? And definitely not did the leader act like one of us? No, the real evaluation is did the leader's words and presence help the team feel more secure, more informed, and more able to do their work? And in fact, more able to do their best work. That's actually what people remember. Now, let me name something else that I think some leaders need to hear, even if this stings just a little. Sometimes what gets called authentic leadership is really just unprocessed emotion with a leadership title attached to it. And I do not say that to shame anybody. I say it because many leaders were never taught how to regulate themselves before they had to lead others. You've heard me talk about this in my previous episodes about emotional self regulation or emotional regulation. And this is important as an emotionally intelligent leader. But see, that's where those leaders were rewarded for speed, confidence, intensity, and being the first to speak. That's the mistake. So they confuse immediacy with honesty, but immediacy is not the same as authenticity. You can be immediate and still be self protective. You can be open and still be manipulative. You can be expressive and still be avoiding responsibility. This is why I talk about leadership maturity. It really matters because a mature leader can say, I'm frustrated without making frustration the center of the conversation. A mature leader can say, I don't agree without turning disagreement into defensiveness. And a mature leader can say, well, I need more time to think without feeling or acting like uncertainty is weakness. That is real leadership. Now, I want to make this distinction even clearer. Authentic commentary from a leader literally sounds something when they say, like, something like this: here's what I know, here's what I do not know, here is what I believe, or here is how I'm thinking about it. Or maybe you say, here's what I need from you, team, or here is what you can expect from me. Inauthentic commentary is less clear and carries lots of inferences. So your team might hear these things, but know there's inference because you're not saying it directly. So saying something like, I'm being honest, but I haven't thought this through. Or I want feedback, but they know you only want agreement. Or you say, I care about the team, but they know you're saying, I'm speaking from my own frustration. Or maybe you say, I want transparency, but the team knows, I'm giving people my feelings without giving them context. See, this is where confusion begins. And as a leader, you want to avoid that. So if you're a leader listening right now, here are the usable practices that you can start using right away. First, slow down before you speak. That doesn't mean become robotic. It means give yourself a pause long enough to start out with not leaning into the emotion. You are sorting out what is the emotion and what is the message. So you might ask yourself, is this a feeling I need to process privately first? Or maybe you ask, is this something the team needs to hear because it affects clarity and direction? That one pause can change the quality of your leadership. It can change how confident your team feels in you and about you. Now, the second is separate truth from discharge. You can tell the truth without unloading. You can be honest without creating emotional work for your team. And you can acknowledge tension without making tension the atmosphere of the meeting. How many times have you gone into a meeting space and you've heard the phrase, you could cut the tension with a knife? Well, why do you think that is? So, a good leadership question is, what's the cleanest, most truthful version of this message? This is a question you can ask yourself before you speak. Not the most dramatic version or the most personal version, but the cleanest, truthful version. And third, let your team feel your steadiness more than your stress. That doesn't mean that you're hiding your humanity. It just means that your team should experience your emotional regulation before they experience your reaction. Because people, when they are unsure, they don't need your rawest moment. What they want and need is your clearest one. And that is where leadership maturity becomes very visible. Now, if you're thinking, well, does this mean leaders should never show emotion? The answer is no. Emotion is not the problem. Unprocessed emotion is the problem. Unregulated emotion is the problem. So, emotion can actually build trust when it's honest, when it's appropriate, and paired with responsibility. But know that emotion can damage trust, especially when it becomes the dominant message. So that's why the best leaders, they're not emotionless. They're regulated and intentional, and they don't perform confidence. They build it through consistency. They don't ask people to trust them, rather, they give people reasons to trust them. And that's how authentic leadership actually looks and behaves when it's done well. It's congruence, it's self awareness, it's honesty with boundaries, it's truth with care. And it's being real without making other people carry your emotional overflow. These are the differences between authenticity and inauthenticity. So here's what I want you to reflect on this week. Where are you being honest in ways that help people? Where are you being real in ways that actually create confusion? Are your words aligned with your values? And do people feel clearer after you speak? Or do they feel more uncertain or unsettled? Do they experience your authenticity as trust building or as uncontained emotion? Those are tough questions if you're trying to be honest, but they are the questions that matter because leadership is now not about being the most raw person in the room, it is about being the most trustworthy. And that trust is built when people can count on your values, your clarity, and your emotional discipline. If this episode gave you something to think about, please subscribe so you do not miss future episodes of Leading Today with Dr. Lisa Bagby. And share this with another leader who can appreciate clearer language for authenticity. But I really want to ask you to leave a comment. I want you to tell me, how do you define authenticity in leadership? And where do you think the line is between honest communication and inauthentic behavior? Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for the work you do to lead authentically with more awareness, more courage, and more care. This is Dr. Lisa Bagby, and this has been Leading Today.